Happy Sabbath. So before I forget, you just go subscribe, do the thing. It's cold. I'm having to wear like a whole entire coat and like a scarf and everything outside just so that you can see this video. So be nice to me. Go and subscribe and like the video and leave a comment. And down in the description we have the lesson, because I'm gonna skip some parts, because if I talk about the whole entire lesson I'm gonna take like 40 minutes and you don't want that. So just go into the lesson, read it through. There's some parts that I won't be able to talk to because time. But it's amazing. The lesson this week was just dope, yo. And just follow us on Instagram because that's cool. And then just share this video with all your friends because they should know how dope the Bible is, right? So okay, let's go into the lesson. Happy Sabbath. Okay, so let's go into the lesson, shall we? Now the lesson this week is kind of way too good for me, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just skip some parts, because if I start talking about them we're gonna be here forever, and that's not the point of YouTube. So we're gonna start talking about, like, the title of the lesson of this week is the Bible as history, right? So let's talk about history and what exactly it is. So history is kind of this account of things that happen and how people tell us that, what happened and blah, blah, blah. But the thing about history is it's told by the victor's point of view. So if somebody wins a war, they are the ones that write the story because they're the ones that are, alive. And then the point of view that is portrayed forever and ever and ever about this said war is from the people that won it, right? So that makes it so that history is not particularly believable if you just look at through a lens. You have to look at different points of view so that you may have an understanding of what's kind of happening all around. Now not only is it written by the people that won, but also by the people that survived, and that's a completely different point of view. Now what makes it the Bible history? Because then we run into a problem, right? Like if today you see a protest, for instance, right? We're seeing lots of protests this day and age because of multiple things like Black Lives Matter. And we're seeing multiple protests, and then some of them turn violent and some of them don't. Now on TV, you most likely just see the ones that turn violent because that's what news is, right? And they're trying to, most of them at least, are trying to manipulate the narrative so that you don't see the peaceful kinds of protests. You only see the looting and the anger and the people running and just destroying property and the fights between the police and the protesters. Now that's the way that you manipulate narrative so that history is changed. But today it's easier for us to understand exactly what is true and what is manipulated and what is not the full picture, because we have things like cell phones that are recording myself talking right now, right? You have people like Instagram pages, and they're just going to show you different sides of what is and what isn't the protest and what was and what wasn't. So that is a little bit difficult with the timing of the Bible, right? Because the Bible was a very, very long time ago, and is actually the oldest complete document of history that we have. And now the thing about history that we need to understand is ancient people didn't really understand the difference between history and myth. And by that I mean not that they believe that all of them believed on the monsters of the Odyssey or anything like that, but it's just that when they would put their story, pen to paper down, that's when they would make a myth, so they make it grand, so that you have this whole entire dynasty of people. So the Bible is told and is believed by some people to be this collection of myths, because if you look at it from a faraway perspective, it's very much like the Odyssey or the Iliad, right? There is this main character. The main character goes through trials, and there's divine intervention in the stories, and all of that just comes together into the big climax where the main character wins or loses or whatever. Now the Bible is different than the Odyssey, for instance, or the Iliad, because its characters act in a different way. Because if you look at it from far away, it seems pretty, similar, right? God resurrected Lazarus, and then Lazarus is now alive, and that could mean multiple kind of things. It could be allegorical, we don't know. But where the Bible differs itself from these epics like the Iliad, it's where the characters are concerned. So first of all, we're going to open the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel. We're going to open on chapter 17, and we're going to read verse 45 and 46. So Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 45 and 46 says this: Then David said to the Philistines, You come to me with a sword and a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. This is a classic story of the Bible, right? So if you ever even heard remotely something about the Bible, you know that David fought this guy called Goliath, and Goliath was very big and very tall, and he was trash talking his Hebrew people and God, and he showed up and he's like, yo, so he's gonna duel me. And then David, he did that for 40 days, and then David showed up. He was not invited, he was just there to give some food, some takeout, and then he was like, yo, you're just gonna let this happen? And then everybody was like, yeah, we're scared, he's tall. And he's like, no, I come with the name of God. And now David later is described to be a man after God's own heart. And that's a big thing, right? David is this big hero, and this is a story that's very important in the Bible because he becomes later one of the greatest kings of all time that are described in the Bible, right? He is the pillar of the Hebrew people because he is also the last king of the United Nations. Because later when Solomon happens and everything else, they just divide between the kingdom of the south and the north. Now that's a whole nother story, but let's focus on the fact that David is this big hero, right? He's this big guy, he's a hero, he's a story, he could be a movie scene, right? This could be this moment when he just looks at Goliath and he says, no, but you can't beat me because I have God by my side. It's just as epic as I am Tony Stark, right? It's just as amazing it is. I am Iron Man. That moment with the snap is just as amazing as this, and actually this is a little bit more amazing, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, if you think about heroes Ulysses or Odysseus from the Odyssey, those people in the stories, they are always good. Everything that happens to Odysseus, for instance, is external, right? He's always the good one. He's perfect. He is this kind of apex of a hero that is uncorruptible, basically. And when he does something bad, is always justifiable by other things. Now, David is not so much like that. So let's open 2 Samuel chapter 11, and we're going to read verse 10 to 15. 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 10 to 15 reads like this. So when they told David, saying, Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, did you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house? And Uriah said to David, the ark in Israel and Judah are dwelling in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink, and to lie with my wife? As you live, as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. Then David said to Uriah, wait here today also, and tomorrow I will let you depart. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. Now when David called him, he ate and drank in before him, and he made him drunk. And at the evening went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his lord. But he did not go down to his house. In the morning it happened that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote on the letter saying, set Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle and retreat from him, that he may be struck down and die. Does that sound like I am Iron Man to you? No, it doesn't, right? This is an awful part of the story. This is not something happened and oh well, now David he's forced to do this awful thing. No, this is a story about how David just looked at the right thing to do and he ignored it completely. Right? He had this sexual relationship with this woman that was not his wife, and he just decided that he could because he was king. Then he calls the woman's husband from war, and he's like, yeah, if he just sleeps with her, then whatever baby that shows up, it's his, right? And this guy is so good that he's like, no, I'm not gonna go and sleep with my wife when I have so many comrades, so many friends, they're out there in the cold and they're dying, and I'm not gonna do that as you do, king. And then David looks at that, he writes a letter to the guy's boss and says, okay, so just put him to die because he won't sleep with his wife. And he gives the letter, his own death threat, to Uriah himself, and Uriah has to take his own death sentence back to the army, and then he dies. That's not the same vibe of a hero that looks at the Goliath and says, nope, you can't hit me because God is by my side. And yet David is described as being, a man after God's own heart. Now, why would anybody do that? If you look again at epics, at stories about the beginning of big great nations like Alexander the Great and Greece and so many others like Rome, you won't see this kind of failure. And there's a reason for that. We are all the own heroes of our stories, and there's a reason why we don't tell other people about our failures. Now, the Bible is trying to show you that it's different because God himself inspired it, and he's like, yes, I know that people are going to think it's just kind of stories, it's just fantasy, so I'm going to show you the truth, because the point of the Bible is not to show you where the Hebrew people came from. The point of the Bible is to show who he is and how we can be better. And now, like, I know it sounds kind of, kind of far away to talk about, Ulysses and Odysseus and, like, Alexander the Great. Those are like things that are almost mythological people. They're almost mythological within themselves because they've been alive like so far away ago. So, okay, so let's talk about Steve Jobs, shall we? So if you have an iPhone like I do, or you have like an iPad or anything Apple at all, you probably are kind of thankful about, Steve Jobs and his existence. If you don't have any Apple thing, you probably are thankful because he was the first dude that decided that touch screen was a thing. Now, even if you're not, Steve Jobs is known as being this, this icon of technology, right? He's this dope guy. He wrote like awesome things and he was amazing. But did you know that Steve Jobs also had a child that he didn't claim until she was like 16 years old? And did you know that he was basically known as not being a nice guy at all? He was like low-key a jerk. In fact, there's like documentaries about this man that has just changed humanity, changed the way that we communicate. He changed everything, and he wasn't such a nice guy, but we wouldn't know that. Gandhi was, a sex addict, and then there's some people that say that Mother Teresa had issues, and Walt Disney was a perv, and there's so many other history and big, great people of our time that we don't even know all that they did, because what matters is the good things that they did. The Bible was trying to show you that its heroes are not great within themselves. They are great because God gave them the power to be great. So let's look at one of the other heroes, shall we? Daniel chapter 1, we're going to read verse 8. It says this: But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now, Daniel is a pretty big dude in the Bible, right? He did amazing things. In fact, if you look at the book of Daniel, it's dope. It's amazing. The guy survived like lions that were hungry and did not eat him. The guy survived just defying the biggest, most powerful man on the earth when he was alive. So he's kind of like a big deal. And this is the beginning of his story. He was taken as a slave, and then he makes this decision to be after God's own heart, right? He makes this decision to purpose on his heart to be everything that God wanted him to be. Now, if you read or if you watch any other kind of story about people that decide to be heroes, usually that comes with some issues in their lives, right? Like whenever Steve Rogers decided to be Captain America, his life didn't get any easier. Now, the different thing about the way that we portray heroes today and the way that the Bible portrays heroes is that his life didn't get any easier, but it goes beyond that. He was weak and his life was hard, and then he only survived because of God. The way that we portray and the way that we tell the stories of people today, they omit the hard parts of the story because we don't want to really believe that all of us could make good decisions. We don't, because if all of us can make good decisions, no special person involved, then that means that we have the responsibility to make good decisions, and that's a little bit trickier, right? If anybody that's just great, if Steve Rogers is just the only person that could work with the serum that made him Captain America, then you don't have to worry about being good and being just and being great, because, well, it was a thing only about him. Now, what the Bible is doing is showing you that the only unique person in the Bible is Jesus, and even him was human, like we are. Now, it's a little different because he never sinned, but anyway, he had, our trials and our trials and our hurts as we do every day. And Jesus, in fact, is one of the easiest ones that we prove that it is like historic relevant, because if you don't know, Jesus divided time itself. We have the time before Christ, and then we have the time Anno Dium, that is like a Latin term to be like after the year of the divine, basically. So, that's Jesus, and Jesus is easy enough to identify as being, at least existing, even if you don't believe that he was the God that he is. because other like historians like Josephus were writing while he was alive, and they wrote about him because he made a great impact on the earth. And then Caiaphas, that's one of the priests that actually didn't like Jesus very much. He was also proven to exist by the archaeologists about 10 years ago or so. Now all of this kind of shows you that criticism over the Bible and how it's just like this propaganda about people, the Hebrew people being awesome. It's not very accurate, right? If you really look at the text and what it's telling you, it's basically showing you that the Hebrew people were not awesome whatsoever. They were just being saved and having their lives saved by God again and again and again and again. So let's talk about faith. I want you to open your Instagram feed. So I'm going to do that right now, okay? So your Instagram feed right here, you're going to probably see mine. I'm going to well, not me, William's going to put it up here. Has like a bunch of great pictures, right? So all those pictures tell a story of who you are. So right here, I'm going to show you one of my favorite pictures in my feed, and that's one of my pictures with my dad, and we were like in the statue in Brasilia, which is the capital of the country that we live in, and I was very, very tiny, and there I was, and in his lap just sitting in the statue. Now this is a beautiful picture. It tells us a beautiful story. It's fun, it's different, it's great, but it doesn't tell you the fact that right after this my dad almost got arrested because we should not be on that statue whatsoever, right? The picture shows a great moment, but it doesn't show you the whole story. Over here I have this one really pretty selfie that doesn't show you how uncomfortable I was because this day was so hot that we could not breathe without sweating. Take a look on your Instagram feed. Take a look about the stories that you're telling other people about your life, and you're gonna understand that humans don't want to tell the truth. We want to tell the edited truth. We want to tell the pretty version of our lives. God knows that. Before we end, we're going to open Exodus chapter 20, and we're going to read verse 2. It says this: I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And then verse 3 says, you shall have no other gods before me. When he says, I am the God that took you out of, slavery, it's not a prideful comment. This is not God boasting on himself because he's dope and he's just like saving our butts because he can. This is a loving God telling us that we could be better and we decided not to, but he's gonna save us anyway. The heroes of the world like Steve Jobs and Martin Luther. Martin Luther told people that he wrote this one book, and it's called On the Jews and Their Lies. And in the book, he says that you should convince the Jews that Jesus is actually, a thing by burning their synagogues down. Martin Luther was a great man, but he had flaws. What God is telling us through the Bible is not this great epic story about how the Hebrew people are the chosen ones, about how we, the spiritual Israel, are the chosen ones to come back to him and live in this great kingdom. That is part of the story, but that's not really exactly why we have all of this, because we could just have half of the Bible and it would tell us that. No, he shows all of the characters' flaws to show us that they were human. He showed David being evil, straight up evil, not even like mistaken, evil. Kill somebody else evil just because he couldn't keep it in his pants. He shows that kind of pain and that kind of choice so that we know that there is a way, and then through faith he's gonna make that a way. That's who we're supposed to be. So that one of these days, after, if we ever, Jesus doesn't come back anytime soon, and like 30 years from now, people look at the memes that we reposted on Instagram stories and they can see Jesus through us. Can show us that it is indeed possible because he makes it possible. He is the God that took us out of Egypt, and that's the story that we should be telling. That's the history that people should see about us in the future. Not the great things that we did, but the awful things that we did and then stopped doing because of him. That's who we are. That's who we should be. Aren't we Christians? Let's pray. Father in heaven, holy is your name. Lord, we thank you so much because just in 1 week you taught us so much about history, about time, and about, the way that we write stories. Lord, thank you so much because you gave me this lesson to teach, and I really like history and I'm really glad about it. mostly, God, we're thankful because you showed us this way of giving ourselves to you and then making history through your eyes and your actions and not our own, because we are evil, Lord. We are straight up evil. We are the dirty secret of the universe, and you know that we shame you every day. Please just come back soon and help us be ready for your coming back, because we are done with the world and we are done with the protests. We're done with the awful people the awful things that we do to each other. Help us come home. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a happy Sabbath, and I see you all next week.